My name is Peter Jones. I'm a member of For Our Grandchildren, and I have a personal message for those political leaders, for those diplomats, and for those United Nations representatives who are attending this conference at Durban. This is the 17th such conference, all directed to the fundamental issue of climate change. And while those conferences have been held and proceeding, the climate has not improved. The only tangible result of such long efforts is an increase in the quantum of greenhouse gas emissions. So I say to you, this is not the time for another Copenhagen. We don't need charismatic political figures making promises about what will happen. We don't need consensus communiques indicating that all is well. What we need is for you to recognize that this is probably your last chance to come up with a world order that indeed will stop climate change.
Anyone with a child or a grandchild threatened by a serious medical condition would do anything in their power to prevent that. Yet it's undeniably documented that all our children and grandchildren on Earth today are threatened by dramatic climate change and serious derangement of their livelihood less than a generation from now on. Our children and grandchildren will hold us accountable as completely irresponsible, disrespectful, and negligent if we do not act now by all effective and available means to avoid this catastrophe and its serious consequences.
That governments are not addressing long-term projects, long-term problems such as climate change. It's easier to address simple individual things at on a short-term basis. It is much more difficult to see a vision of the future and to work your way towards it, realizing that you may not be there when the solutions show their merit. It's time we began to see our political politicians as people who must be addressed. They must be harassed. They must be protested at every turn in order to get them to recognize that the highest priority at this point in time is dealing with the question of climate change.
Until quite recently, the Canadian government has been a supporter of the Kyoto Convention and has worked constructively at these United Nations conferences. But that has changed. We now have a government that does not wish to see any significant accomplishment come out of the Durban conference. In fact, they don't want the rest of the world to know that there's a significant public opinion in Canada that supports international movement towards an order that will fight climate change. Let me give you one example of the lengths to which the Canadian government is prepared to go to suppress international recognition of this opinion in Canada which supports action.
My name is Frankie James. I'm a Canadian artist who recently discovered that I've been blacklisted by the Harper government for speaking out on climate change. I was supposed to have a show of my climate change art which would have toured 20 cities in Europe. However, due to intervention by the Canadian Embassy, that show was cancelled. I spoke with the show producer, a nonprofit in Croatia, and the woman said that she had spoken with the Canadian Embassy, and the cultural officer had told her, "Don't you know this artist speaks against the Canadian government?" I don't speak against the Canadian government. I speak against some of the Harper government policies regarding the tar sands and climate, but I don't speak against that. And I was told that the government was very offended by my Dear Prime Minister essay, which I wrote in 2008. And in that essay, I asked that the Prime Minister make polluters pay so that the next generation doesn't have to. This type of censorship of a Canadian artist is so shocking to me, that I would be targeted because I am speaking out for the environment. Dirty oil underlies this. The government is so hell-bent on managing the message that they don't want to allow any dissenting voices. So what am I doing? The band art, which was not allowed to be shown in Europe, is now being shown on the streets of Ottawa. I'm shining a bright light on this silencing by the Canadian government, and I hope that people will learn more about my story and share it widely.
Now it's up to us. For the sake of our children and our grandchildren, grandparents everywhere must force their governments to take action on climate change.